coming along today. In the second of our 3-part series, our winter series, we're going to be looking today at what we need inside our chicken coop and run so that it's a nice, warm and healthy, entertaining environment for our hens. So for the last session, back here a month ago, we looked to do with all the details to do with the coop and how it should be set up and different types of coops, predator prevention and things, and how to keep their predators out of the coop. Today we're looking with a bit more detail for the internals and everything inside, so to keep everything nice and warm for the girls. So most coops, who has a chicken coop already here? Lovely. Right, a couple of people. So I like ideally a concrete floor for a chicken coop, and the reason for that is that the predators, foxes and rodents can't dig under and get up into the coop. So it's really good for that. It's nice and easy for cleaning as well with a concrete floor. It's not always possible because if you just have an imported coop, you probably won't have a concrete floor for it as a rule. So you can create a floor out of concrete pavers as one option. If you have those lying around, it's always good to reuse and use things that might be lying around the home or someone else's home, something that someone's going to discard. If we can use that, and it's something that can be used in the chicken coop, certainly on the floor, pavers, bricks, things like that can be quite good. You can also have a mesh floor, a tight Avery mesh. You have to be aware that the mesh will rust over time. So if you can start with a better quality mesh, will really help. Something galvanised or something like stainless steel mesh, and it just means it's going to take it that much longer to deteriorate. Although, as I say, when the fox comes digging underneath the coop and he tries to come up, it's not going to be that easy. He's only going to come up on one spot. But if that spot happens to be compromised, a bit of metal fatigue or rust in that spot, well then he'll be able to gain entrance. That is a bit of a risk, and hence the concrete floor, it's easy to clean, and there's no way that a fox can dig up and under and into the coop at all. So you can use wooden boards as well. Wooden boards are okay. You've got to be very mindful of rotting though, and those types of issues and damp. So we do need to support those boards on some piles or something to just keep them off the ground so they're not starting to absorb the moisture and they potentially rot down and provide a pathway for a fox and rodents to get into. But yeah, some hardwood boards would work. Bedding and nesting, what you're sitting on is one of the ones we tend to recommend for the bedding side of things, because it's relatively inexpensive and it does a really, really good job of breaking down and composting the droppings, which is what we want. The wood shavings will last a long time because, as I say, they absorb the moisture out of the dropping very quickly, and within 3 or 4 hours all the smell's gone and the shavings have absorbed the moisture, and they all break down, all the pathogens, all the bacteria breaks down very efficiently using wood shavings. It's also not too dusty, and that does mean that we don't have too many issues with regard to respiratory problems or anything like that. Nothing's been aggravated by too much dust because it has been extracted from the wood shavings. Key thing with wood shavings is that we don't want any sort of treated pine, and if you can get shavings from joiners and builders potentially. A lot of the time, just be careful that they're not treated pine or any treated types of wood, which can cause a few issues as well. We use, I'd say, throughout the coop about 10 centimetres of the wood shavings, and I say if you can have your concrete floor, a nice deep layer, 10 centimetres or 12, can be a little bit deeper, that's okay. If you see the Avery mesh or some sort of mesh on the floor, people think, well, the poor old bird's going to injure its little claws, its little foot pads on the mesh, and it's like, well, no, because you're going to cover it in your wood shavings. You have a nice deep layer. It'd be very rare that the chicken will be able to dig down through the wood shavings to get close enough to the mesh to cause any problems at all. So yeah, that layer protects the chick for that. You don't want, say, they can only work in a dry environment. We don't want any rain, any moisture coming into the coop, and that's one thing I'll talk a little bit more about. But stopping water from coming to the coop is very important, and the location of that coop, as I mentioned a month ago, is vital that it's in a well-drained area. Nest boxes and perches. So nests should be lower than perches ideally. Otherwise it's going to encourage the birds to sleep in the nest box, which is not something we want at all. So have your nest box down lower in the actual chicken coop, and I'll just explain again as I did last time. The chicken run is this component here of the coop. And this box area, that for me is the chicken coop as such, the coop and the run. And then we have, most people, the larger area, which is then the free range area. So it's really kind of three components, I guess, for a good backyard chicken setup. But yeah, run, coop and range area. So nice and dry in both the coop, and the run. And life is easy. You don't have to keep replacing the bedding materials. Don't recommend any of the hay, straw, mulches. Yes?
Just to be clear, you talk about the wood shavings in the coop and the run?
Yes. Perches, I say. I like a graduated perch. I like them about 4 centimetres square. It's quite large, a lot larger than what a lot of people think. But they've got a big foot pad on them. And they just put little claws around the end to sort of hold on to the perch. But quite a large foot pad, so we need a bit of space there, a bit of area for them to be comfortable on those perches. You can have 35, 40 centimetre oval perch. It's quite good, otherwise flat with sort of rounded edges, beveled edges on that square piece of wood. Ideally like a hardwood, something that's going to be a bit difficult for parasites to get into, because they do like living in wood, certainly the red mite. So you've got to be mindful of that. You allow 30 centimetres per chicken, which is ample room really for most chooks. So we're going to pile up together and just squash them together. They feel safer, they'll be warmer. I do like a ladder type configuration. Just a ladder, you can lean it against the wall on about a 45-degree angle, and that means that boss lady, if she so chooses, she can be at the very top of that ladder and she feels quite appropriately positioned. And then the subordinates underneath, well, they can all take their level in life, I guess you'd say, and they don't get toileted on from a height from above because it's on that angle. So we avoid the problem of one going onto the next, one going onto the next. We have it on the right angle. So just be mindful that a 45 is about right, and you'll need about a 30 centimetre gap between those rails of that ladder. Having a top of ladder, you can easily remove it too, and then the wood shavings underneath maybe a deeper bed, say 15 to 20 centimetres of wood shavings underneath the perching area is a good idea, because they are dropping a third of their droppings are done at night time, so all in the one place. So they tend to build up relatively faster underneath the perching area. If you have a deeper layer, you can just rake off weekly. You can just pull that ladder out of the way, rake off the top layer, and you can just leave the next layer. And as it comes down to sort of 7 or 8 centimetres, you'll just fill it up with shavings again. Once a week or so, you'll rake off the top into the compost. It's already mixed in with the shavings. It's all going to break down into compost nicely in your compost pile. Plug all holes. Coop integrity. We want to inspect the coop on a fairly regular basis. Look for any compromises, any sort of any weakness. Make sure that the integrity of that coop is good. No, things wear over time. Everything slowly deteriorates over time. With weather, particularly a harsh Australian climate. So want to make sure there's no sort of water seeping in, that we don't have rusting, we don't have a damage to any mesh or any rotting in any of the boards and things. So replace those as soon as you can. Any little holes and things that a rodent might be able to get through, we might want to just put a bit of steel wool into those little gaps, any just small little holes I'm talking about, and that just will help to keep rodents out of from trying to just sneak into the coop and the run. Ventilation is also quite important. Certainly, particularly in the wintertime, I guess, also when you don't have the heat to get to start lifting with the convection current, starting to lift up some of the fumes and the ammonia fumes in particular, which are a large component of the chook dropping. So ventilation. And we want that up around the apex of the coop, just up sort of this area of the run, and that way as the fumes come up and they can be expelled outwards. So even if you have some ventilation nearing the top of the coop part where they're sleeping at night time, it can be quite good just to release some of the fumes, which ammonia can damage the respiratory system, so we have to be a bit careful for that. Enrichment. All right, so we've got temporary and permanent enrichment. What I mean by that is that we can have it's like something that just distracts our chickens, gives them something, some entertainment, something to do, something to entertain themselves with. Say they do need entertaining. Say in these ones, they find it. They go hunting for it and they'll find it. Normally involving their chicken feed, of course, but. Yeah, pick blocks are a great way of distracting. It's sort of temporary distractors for the hens, and it's a great little treat for them certainly. And they can just go on the scrap tray and give them something to sort of play with and peck away at, something a little bit different in the environment. Obviously, it's going to go fairly quickly, being a sort of healthy treat block. Also, hanging your vegetables and things. Silver beet, a bunch of silver beet you may have heard about before. Just tying it and just hooking it into the run. Hanging down in the run, and then they can be jumping up and pecking away at that. It's quite good for their behaviour. The other form of enrichment is more just physical items that you can put inside the run, such as children's playground equipment. Some old stuff maybe not being used anymore. That can just go in there in the larger runs anyway, a little climbing frame, something like that, more sort of the outdoor play equipment that children can use when they're young kids, young toddlers. They can be quite good. Ideally not any wooden equipment because, say, mites can get into it and they can live in the wood quite happily and then come out and feed on the chicken at night time. But yeah, anything for them to tap away at, you can put an old tyre in there, which would double as a dust bath. Can be really good with a bit of your wood ash and your bugs away. In our case, bugs away, wood ash and dirt, and then a bit of wood shavings in a tyre. A great little dust bathing area for them as long as it's in a completely dry location. Hanging DVDs, CDs is quite good as well. Sometimes they can scare some breeds of chicken. They get a bit scared from that, but they can peck away there and they find a bit of entertainment in that. And particularly if you're going away on holiday and you need to just keep your birds more confined, for maybe just in the coop for a week or two, potentially, depending on the size of your coop. That may be a necessity. You may have bad weather. There may be some bad weather during winter, and you might just need to keep the birds in for a period of time rather than let them out there free ranging and making a bit of a mess of the garden. So just if you've got a bit of enrichment, they'll be a bit happier in there and less likely to start pecking on each other, and then they can start this negative feather pecking behaviour, which is not something you want to start and develop in the coop either. Feeders and drinkers should be nice and high. We want to have feeders and drinkers around 25 centimetres high. Sometimes even 30, because the chickens can really reach up. It's amazing. Come here, can you demonstrate? No. All right. But the surprising, just with their physiology, they can sort of reach up like a giraffe and they can get access to drinkers and feeders quite easily. And sometimes I've thought, I've probably got that a bit too high at about 40 centimetres. I think at one customer's property that, here we're just going to demonstrate now. Excellent, come on in. You think there's something? Yep. And so that's fairly high there, isn't it? And she'll still be get access to that. No, there's not much in there, is it? Oh, yep, come on. That's what would there be 40 centimetres maybe, potentially? Yeah, there we go. So she'd be able to drink out of that, no problem. Yeah, no problem. So hang them high, nice and high, your feeders and drinkers. It just stops the shavings, any mess when they're dust bathing activity. They can load up their feeders and drinkers. So make sure the feeder's in a nice dry area. So the feed must be dry. Make sure no rain can get into it. Then it just cakes and it goes very hard like concrete. So we don't want that to happen. Of course, the drinker, no problem. That can go out, obviously be wet. There's no problem with that at all. So that can go anywhere. You may need to look at a tread-on feeder, certainly. One of these here. Your tread-on feeder, if you want to free-range your birds, you want to get them out there a lot of the time. Of course, the pigeons are going to come into your coop far more often. It doesn't take too long. A week or two, they start to come in, one tells their friend, and then their friend, and next the whole family, next thing the whole neighbourhood of wild birds are all in there getting stuck into the chicken food and having a great time. So probably laying much better eggs, no doubt. So a tread-on feeder will tend to stop that. It just takes 3 days of training, certainly. And it's just for these, just, block it open. They see the food in here for 3 days. You can close it at night time if you've already got a bit of a rodent or a wild bird problem. You might want to just close that. Well, for rodents, night time. And then 3 days, you test them out, just check how intelligent they are by closing it off. And they know that I went here yesterday to go and get my chicken feed. So, and then one steps on there, opens up, and they think, oh, that's where it is. And they all quickly learn to take their feed from the tread-on feeder. But that's a great way of just stopping your rodent and wild bird activity. So yeah, front seats for this bird. Look at that. Eyeballing everyone. Right, what are you guys up to, she's thinking? Yeah. Oh, they're entertaining. All right, so yeah, the trundle feeder works really well, but if you have a nice tight aviary mesh in your coop and your run, you won't and you don't let the birds necessarily free range too often, or when you do, you have a separate feeder for them when they're outside maybe, free ranging. Well then, you probably won't need, you can go with a more traditional feeder, and that's your traditional barrel feeder style. The barrel and the feed, very good access for the birds certainly, for the chickens. But that's your traditional feeder. But so wild birds, rodents, they sniff it out, they can get into those quite easily. So there's just something you need to be mindful of if you have a larger mesh that the rodents and wild birds can get through. Scraps. So feeding our chickens. In the coop, we want any scraps should go into a scrap tray. There's a small scrap tray. Plastic ones, stainless steel ones, but easier to clean. Pop your scraps on there, into the coop for the birds. They'll get into those scraps, and then anything left over after a couple of hours, ideally we want to put those back into the tray, because no doubt they'll get them off the tray quite efficiently. Put them back in the tray into your compost bin. All right, so we want them to just break down with the chicken droppings and the wood shavings in your compost bin. We don't want to leave them in the coop, because obviously they will start to attract rodents. You'll just get more smell in the coop, more disease will start to build in the coop if you've got your scraps just sitting there, composting, with the chickens walking over them and whatnot and digging through them now and again. A lot more bacteria, very high bacterial loads in there. Would you
take them out like at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Not leave them in overnight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I give them 2 or 3 hours at them, and out into the compost. They do have a specific diet. They are very domesticated animals now, like our dogs and cats. And they can't just fend for themselves. Just foraging's not enough for most chickens these days. Well, not any that are laying eggs with any sort of consistency. They're far too domesticated, and they just can't fend for themselves and are out there foraging. The same, we have a huge range of nutrition and grass and different things that they'll be eating when they're foraging. That ranges a lot throughout the seasons. In spring obviously is a time of abundance. We have lots of grass, sometimes a bit too long, which can cause its own problems, but we have lots of bugs and grasshoppers and insects, and they can get maybe 10-15% of their dietary needs during spring. But then come autumn, winter, a lot of the nutritional value in grass can be quite low. And so they're not getting nearly as much nutrition from the grass. So and less insects around as well. So there's a lot of variability with that, and with that variability it means that you're going to get some more issues with the health of your hens, potentially, and certainly egg laying as well, if you're leaving them to sort of do their own thing and just get them a sort of a low grade feed along with that. All right, so we always recommend obviously a good high grade feed, and that's always available to them daylight hours. And then anything else, any other healthy scraps, it's great. It's good to get them eating our kitchen scraps and things like that. It's good it's just good for the environment. It's good to to get the birds eating that. So you do want to encourage that, but that's not the main diet that they need, and that they can easily break down inside them in their little gizzard to power the bird and to keep them healthy and laying well.
I've been giving mine some fresh veggies.
Yep.
They love a cucumber.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's some things I love too, and I've got a lot of customers with. What are they like? Tomatoes, and they have like porridge and things like yogurt, all these sorts of things. And I always say it's a bit like me and cheeseburgers. I'd eat cheeseburgers 5 times a day, no problem at all, and I would gobble them down happily. But it would kill me over time, and probably a fairly short period of time. So things that they like doesn't necessarily mean it's good for them. But cucumber, that's pretty harmless, that's okay. Vegetable scraps, no problem at all with that. So it's a good idea too, one of my golden rules I guess, is allowing your feeder to completely run out on a weekly basis. Seems a bit strange, and some people will think maybe it's going to cause some problems if they're running out of feed for 3 or 4 hours and whatnot, when that feeder runs out, once a week. And the reason I recommend it is because they eat all the components in their feed. Now some feeds, of course, they particularly feeds with sunflower seeds in them. They'll tend to pluck out those sunflower seeds and throw their beak around and throw everything else as they're digging through for the sunflower seeds. So we don't like feeds with too many sunflower seeds in them. But also, if the other grains aren't of high enough quality, they'll go hunting for those seeds, and they'll sort of leave the rest because they think, I don't really like the rest of it. So they do need to eat all of the components in the feed, but of course a lot of that feed, the components, like particularly in our feed, is called are the fines, and they're quite like a powdery type feed. And that's really important for them. It's all organic. Well, on ours it is. It's all organic. It's all the vitamins, minerals, trace elements, all things that they need for good health over time. So we want them to eat that. Part of that is just saying, you fill up the feeder enough for a week, and you say, well, that's all you're getting, girls. I'm not going to top it up. I'm not going to shake that feeder and get the larger components rolling down. You need to eat it right down until it's all gone, and then I'll refill it. And they do. They work it out. But a lot of people think, oh, they look hungry, oh, I better shake my feeder, and then they will get stuck into it. Oh, they must be starving. No, they're not starving. They're training you. They're just training their owners to keep shaking that feeder, because I'm going to fake that that's all I want. And yet you leave it, they'll eat everything down, including all the fines. And then you find the fines won't tend to build up, as they can do. They can build up and up, and the next thing they're flying out. Next thing, the chicken can throw all the fines and the powder all over the place, make more of a mess, attract more rodents, because they're leaving the powder, and the powder keeps building and building and building until it starts to overflow. So no, we just basically say, it's not starving them, but it's saying, no, you just eat the whole lot. Now, the reason we can do that without a problem is that the chickens have a crop. Right? So they've got their little storage area, their pre-digestion storage area, and that can be quite, take a fair bit of food actually in that crop. So as they eat, down it comes into the crop, starts filling up the crop, and over 12 hours, it slowly is released into the stomach. Right? So they've got their little storage area. So they can fill up, they can be fine still have food essentially for up to 12 hours. And they just keep filling that through a little tube, comes into their stomach, and then they grind it all up in their gizzard, which is a very powerful muscle which grinds all the feed up that they've consumed that comes out of the crop, with all the stones and the shell grit in your chicken feed. So I now and again I get people to say, I've got these stones in my feed. Oh, well, what are you doing, putting all these stones in there? It's just trying to pad it out with stones. So well, no, if they don't have that, they're going to die. So it's kind of important that it's in there. So they need those stones for the gizzard to grind up and crush up all their feed. Really important for them. When they're out free ranging, they'll eat their own stones and bits and pieces, all right, to help with that. Quite good with that. So, but yeah, essential part of their diet. So parasites, check the hens each month. Also check your hens for the body weight. If there's a lighter weight, you'll get a bit of a feel for that. Once you pick up sort of 4 or 5 of your chooks, you realise, oh, this one's a little bit light. You probably would notice it just by looking at them too. You think, oh, she looks a little bit smaller. With a bit of experience with the hens, you realise that you cannot notice things. I find I notice things. I can just glance at one. I think, oh, she looks a bit underweight. Or sure enough, I pick her up and she is underweight. So signs of worms, internal parasites, external parasites. Have a look around the vent of the bird, which is the most important area. That's the area that the parasites love to do their work and their activity. Good blood flow, and it's nice and warm. So the parasites have a nice comfortable existence around the vent area, and you'll see those little clusters of knit eggs that start to form from the base of the tail feather, the vent feathers and the fluff there, and the feather, the soft downy feathers, and you'll see the clusters of knit eggs, and I've got parasites and I need to get on top of that. And you'll want to do that ideally to treat parasites over the 7-day period. Do something for 7 days, certainly with the more natural ways that we like to do it with, which is the bugs away and lice away powders and the neem-based spray, wipe out mites, which is used for the mite. And the red mite is a much more difficult and problematic parasite, external parasite, whereas lice aren't quite so bad. But both of them can be dealt with quite effectively. Just do it over 7 days. Always be vigilant, 7 days. We recommend something a bit, a two-pronged, approach, which being the powders and the liquid for mites, because they are such a pain. And if you don't get rid of them quickly, they become a real annoyance. And they'll bite you, and they'll bite the kids, and they come in the house and they bite the dog. They can't complete the life cycle, but they're real annoyance. Whereas the poultry lice aren't any big deal. They eat the feather dander and the dead skin cells of chickens, so it's like no big deal. They just cause a bit of overpreening and not such a big problem. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the red mites a few times, and
yep.
They live in wood.
Yeah. And they'll tend to get into the nooks and any cracks, and hairline cracks or anything certainly in joins in the wood and whatnot. They like to just secret themselves in there, so that's a classic place for the red mite. But it's a pain because they live out in the wooden parts of the coop or even a wood pile next door to the coop. They'll come out only for an hour and a half, 2 hours at night time to feed off the bird. They'll pierce the skin though and they'll drink the blood from the bird, a bit like a mosquito, which is where it's a bit of a problem because then it can create the issue whereby the bird can get secondary infections and things. And also the mite can carry, pathogens and things on itself.
Soluble stuff to spray all your wood.
Yep.
And a powder on the...
And a powder, and they're also even a bit of a flicking into the wood, but it's just a bit harder to get it to sort of obviously stick on the wood. So we powder the bird, and also in the bedding, and like fresh bedding, we'd put powder on the bedding too. But yeah, certainly powder over the bird too every second day, and then we'd use a spray, every other day as well, with the red mite in particular. And just to conclude, housekeeping. So finally, we've come to housekeeping. Replace bedding, ideally probably twice a year, should I say. Can be a good idea. Just keep things fresh, keep things clean. With any bedding, a bit of bugs away. Diatomaceous earth is another idea, just to pop a bit every couple of months or so. Just to keep that environment nice and hostile to insects that might happen to come in. You'll have more problems, of course, if you do have wild birds coming into the coop to get the feed. They bring in all the nasties. All the bad stuff comes in for the pigeons and the doves and whatnot. So you've got to be that much more vigilant. You're going to get that many more problems when you've got the wild birds coming in. So you just have to clean a bit more frequently. Finally, storing your feed should always go into an airtight, waterproof container, ideally steel, so no rodents, no pests can get into it, and that's why something like these stainless steel bins, they're very, very airtight and watertight, and something like that, or you can have the big plastic wheelie bins. I've got customers with that. Just keep the feed as airtight as possible. Does keep it fresher for longer, and it's importantly just keeping the rodents out of it. With our new bags of feed, of course, I'll recommend you don't want to store it in these bags. Of course, rodents will just chew through it. They will chew through our boxes that we used to have as well, and most feed bags. The plastic, they'll get through that no problem at all. So with these, they should be open, tipped into a wheelie bin or some sort of airtight container, ideally, folded, put away in the car or to be returned, and we recycle them, sanitise them, recycle them, and you get $1 credit for every bag returned. So we're trying to get the whole circular economy thing happening within our business. Certainly we want to convert as many things, certainly all the packaging on plastic packaging, we want to get away from all of that too in the future, which just takes time, but we'll get there.
Are there anything chickens can't eat that'll be harmful?
There's a few things, but they're normally very good at, they'll select the right things for them. They're fairly clever with knowing what they should and shouldn't eat. But it's also one reason why we sort of just give them a high grade feed, because that way all their diet is taken care of. And then they might just want to pick at a few bits, and they love their grass, definitely. But they normally know like certain flowers and things. I think, well, no, I'll steer clear of those. But they can at times like gobble down a few too many redbacks, or sometimes a whitetail or two, which aren't always overly good for them. So they can make a mistake now and again, but they're normally quite good at selecting the right things. We normally recommend, things that they shouldn't really eat? Citrus and potato skins, uncooked in particular.
Peel, onions and
Mushroom?
and anything that's processed. So your pasta, your rice, curries, any processed food you don't give them.
They don't seem to eat mushrooms so much, I have to admit. Even like the wild ones or toadstools and things, they don't seem to worry about eating those at all. So yeah, they're normally pretty good with what they eat, but now and again they do get it wrong. Yeah.
Mine love the rice.
Oh yeah, get this thing though. It's like mean burgers, so yeah, they're into the rice, but
Just maybe once a week, a handful. You wouldn't give it to them every day. Either or, doesn't matter.
yeah, they'll pick over bones. They'll pick at the bone probably. It smells like meat. They're omnivores. I'll be into the meat and quite happy. They get into people's dog food, people's dogs' dog food, and they get stuck into that. They've had a lot of kibble, yeah. But they've offended a lot of dogs over the years, certainly our chickens, for stealing their meat and their dog roll, and they love it. They get stuck into it. Yeah.
Can I just clarify?
Yes, sir.
So on the bottom of the run, 10 centimetres of
wood shavings. Yep.
And in the nest?
Yeah, good question. Sorry, I think I missed that. The hemp fibre we use for the nest box. Now this is the one here. So it's because of its antibacterial qualities. It's a bit dearer, certainly more expensive than any other bedding form. It's just much more effective, highly absorbent. People that use it, they use it once and they go, oh, why didn't I discover this years ago?
And how often do you change it?
Oh, well, if the birds aren't sleeping in the nest box, my other golden rule, well then, every 6 months, every year, maybe. Yep. The key is keeping them out of the nest box at night time. And they're saying, a lot of people, but they love to sleep there. And I think, no, that's a problem. No, we've got to establish that behaviour early on before they start to, just get into the nest box and it becomes a habit. Yeah, so that's all part of the orientation for the device customers when we first get the new birds home. Yeah, we've got the orientation, 7 days minimum, and they're settling in a new country, in a new house, and you've got to give them time, greater confinement, not room to roam. And we also need to always be checking the nest box to make sure we don't have any night sleepers in there. And we may barricade that nest box, after about 3-4 in the afternoon. There shouldn't be any egg laying going on after 3 at all.
So egg laying is mainly during the day?
It's mainly between about 7:30 and 11 a.m. 80% of eggs are laid. Yeah. They're very sensitive to light. The first light in the morning is the activator, and here we go. It's time to, I feel ready to lay the egg. Once the egg's laid, within half an hour, the next ova is released into the oviduct and goes through its 25 hour journey through the 65 centimetre long oviduct. So, and then all the components of the egg are put together all on its journey. And once it's laid, half an hour, next one off, next cab off the rank. Yeah. So typically it happens at night time, and then in the morning, light, it's ready to start ready to lay that egg. Any other questions at all at this stage? Thank you. I can't say very much to come along. This is the second part of the 3-part winter series. So the next one, it's all about viruses, diseases of poultry, all these things that can come in and cause a few issues with our flocks. So that's always a one that's interesting to do as well. So thanks very much. Thank you.